Hi, I'm David Banks, a producer here at Riot Games. We'd like to take this opportunity to share with you an early look at the in-development update to Summoner's Rift that we're about to push to the PvE. We're not finished yet, and we'll keep you updated on the team's hard work in the months to come. But right now, let's show you where we're headed.
Hey everybody, and welcome to the Riot Games headquarters here in Santa Monica, California. My name is Alex Lehman. I'm the senior animator on the updated Summoner's Rift project, and my summoner name is Riot Captain LX.
Hey guys, my name is Richard Liu, aka Riot Gnome, and I'm the game designer on the project.
Yeah, and I'm gonna be here representing the art side of a bigger team that has been working on the updated Summoner's Rift.
And I'll be representing game design.
So for the next 30 minutes, we want to field your questions. We collected some questions already from Twitter, and please feel free to just write your questions in the chat. We have people writing them down for us, and we're going to read them off the monitor. And while we're waiting for the first questions to come in, I wanted to give you guys a visual tour around the map, and also explain how we went about updating the Summoner's Rift. We had 4 tenets of updating the map, to a more recent look. The first one was readability and clarity. That was really important for us, that it's easier to read a team fight and understand where you are at any given moment in a game. Second one was visual fidelity. We wanted to make sure that the map is actually representing the game that we all love, that every wall has the correct thickness, and Richard will talk hopefully more about that later. Third, gameplay. Not only did we want to keep the gameplay the same on parity, but we wanted to use this time to actually update the gameplay in very few tenets, and you will talk about Baron and Dragon a little bit. Yeah. And finally, thematic cohesion. Especially from the art side, we felt this was a great chance to bring the Summoner's Rift onto a foresty mountaintop environment and really make it feel like this is a forest.
Right, it has to belong somewhere.
Exactly. So let's look at the map, and just mind you, this is all work in progress. The first thing we're going to look at here is the blue base, and there's the spawn at the spawn platform. We see it has more blocky shapes. Those are paladin-like structures. We use the stag as a symbol for this area. And then on the other hand, we have the red base, which uses more rounder shapes, mage-like structures. You will see staffs and scrolls, hopefully also more floating elements. And that should really distinguish those two bases from one another. And then we'll find, in the jungle, we'll find a focal point, which is Baron Nashor. This is where everything starts. We see not only Baron, but we see these cracks that emit from there, which kind of cause the north and the west part of the jungle to be more destroyed and have like these cracks go through them. The north part of the jungle has hints of red. We see red fallen trees. It points towards our new red brambleback, which is the red buff. And hopefully we'll talk a little bit more about that. And then you go to the east side, where you will clearly see bluish tones. Again, we're in blue buff area. You'll see a light rain and these blue stones that hopefully at any given time tell you, okay, I'm in the east part of the jungle. Less destruction as well. Now, if we go south, we're going to come to the most overgrown part of the map. This is furthest away from where Barren erupted and the cracks are. So this is what we as an art team always imagined Summoner's Rift would look like if Barren had never been on this map. And there are also hints of red, of course. And then finally, if we go to the east side, it's a very rocky shapes. There are hints of blue that again point towards blue buff, but in this case there's more destruction to tell you you're in the east part of the jungle rather than on the in the west part of the jungle rather than the east part.
Right. And really the goal here from a gameplay standpoint is that when you look at the map, right, even if you're unfamiliar with the specifics of the terrain, of the gameplay there, you know from a very quick glance exactly where you are based on that orientation. And that's sort of the goal there. And without further ado, let's go right into questions that you guys have asked.
Exactly. So the first question for you, John Exka asked, will the jungle spawn be a little late because of the new spawn animation, or is it still in sync?
So luckily we actually just got to see blue buff spawn there. And those of you who are, kind of astute, observers have probably noticed in the trailer that when certain mobs spawn, you see a little flash, right? And that really is the ceremony that we want to have show players like, hey, this monster is now targetable. So to answer the question very directly, right, blue buff is still going to spawn at 155. All of the monsters will spawn at the correct times. Instead, the animation will actually pre-roll before, so you kind of get a better idea of anticipation.
Yeah, right. I mean, ideally, it helps you just to attack right at the right moment. Right. For a silver player like me, this might actually make the difference between do I get this guy in time or
so
not?
The idea here is, you want to get your eyes on the game and not a timer.
Right. The next question, it comes from Level Pulse. What made you update the map after such a long time? Well, I mean, League of Legends is an evolutionary game. As you can see, Karthus view we just put out, Karthus doesn't look like he looked like 5 years ago when we started putting out League of Legends. For us, League of Legends is an esport. It's something you play with your friends. It's a game you have fun with for many, many years. And it was time for us to clean up the gameplay, make it more readable, and hopefully update the visuals to something that the players will like.
Yeah, absolutely. So Namarax wants to know, since there are less polygons on the new Summoner's Rift, according to a Reddit post I saw, does that mean better performance on lower end PCs? Well, if you're the proud owner of a toaster, we're happy to say that we really hope that yes, it's going to be it's going to perform very well. And we really built the map with lower end PCs in mind. And performance is absolutely one of our top priorities. We want to make sure that if you can play Summoner's Rift right now, you'll still be able to play it. And we're shooting for as much performance parity as we can before we go to live.
Yes. So TB Skin, old SR had torches, signs, and looked a bit more like a constructed arena. Why the shift to an untamed nature aesthetic? Well, we, on the one hand, we wanted to keep the old spirit of Summoner's Rift, but as I said, one of the tenets was thematic cohesion. And we looked at some of the camps and we really felt they don't belong there. Wraith felt more like they belonged to Twisted Treeline. Right. Blue Buff had some soup that he was cooking up. It was about time that we actually brought this onto the Summoner's Rift and really thought about what that meant. Yeah. And we decided on this mountaintop environment that looked like a forest, lush and wild, and then Barren that is living in this environment. So that was the goal, why we wanted to visually update it, and then all the gameplay aspects that came to it.
Yeah, and we really wanted things to make sense, right? Alex, during development, you always talked about how we didn't want it to look like, monsters waiting at a bus stop, right? That was always the term you used. And we really tried to make sure that everything felt like it belonged there.
Yeah, like especially as an animator, it bugged me for years that you could walk up to wolves and you can stand next to dragon and they don't even notice you, they don't look at you. And this gave us the great chance of making creatures feel more interactive and like they belong into that environment and are not cooking soup.
Yeah.
Chanu3 says, the lanes look smaller. Is the pace of gameplay going to change because of that?
What do you think about that, actually, Alex?
Well, so actually, if they look smaller, that might come from us cleaning up the gameplay space. We are actually starting with the same navigation mesh, and hopefully you can talk a little bit about that in a second. But visually, all we did is we cleaned up the gameplay space so that there's more clarity, more readability on the action. And that's almost like, you know, if you clean up your room, sometimes you go like, wow, this room looks much bigger. You didn't change the room, you didn't make it bigger, you didn't change anything, you just cleaned it up.
Yeah. And you know, a sort of related question, right, is did we actually change anything about, you know, the gameplay in terms of the map, right? And outside of Baron and Dragon, when we look at, say, the walls, right, what we actually did wasn't change how thick or narrow the walls were. Instead, we made them match up to what the gameplay was. So what I mean by this is, like, there's this concept called glass walling, right, where you can see this really readily on live Summer's Rift, especially in the base wall. So if you try to walk really close to the base walls, you'll notice, like, before you actually touch it, you'll be stopped because, in fact, the gameplay part of the navigation doesn't match the visuals, right? So what we did for the update to Summer's Rift was make sure that for as much as possible, where the wall is visually is also where the gameplay is.
Yeah.
So yeah, next question. Lol Snack Attack wants to know, will new animations be visible to indicate things like dragon spawning, even for someone behind Dragon Wall?
Well, you know, I was very invested in spawn animations, but this is a gameplay question.
This is absolutely a gameplay question, right? And the answer is no. We want to make sure, again, that these don't impact gameplay as much as possible, which means that if you don't have visibility of Dragon or Baron or whatever is spawning, you won't have visibility of the spawn animation itself.
Exactly, and with that comes a question from Fifi Fofum. Will the animation of monsters like Dragon Blue Buff happen every time you approach them? And the answer is no. Like, this is a spawn animation, especially the ones that you guys saw in the videos. That's the time at the spawn, so 2:30 a Dragon. If you want to see it, that's when you should be there, or you should like set your timer after you kill Dragon. It's clearly there to tell people when the next attack can follow. But on the other hand, if you just pass by Dragon and you miss the spawn animation, you know, don't worry. There will be a really cool change in animation because we also added proximity animations. We made it so that creatures are now reacting to you. You know, wolves might be sleeping. Blue Buff actually almost shuts down. He's just like folding together into like a little small rock. And the moment you approach, they burst out and react to you. They will look at you and it will hopefully feel way more interactive and like a live environment.
And to caveat this, right, all of these are actually client sides, so if you're Evelyn and you're invisible, no, the opponent won't see that you're actually sitting right beside Dragon behind him, right?
Yeah, the visibility is still really important. So here's another question from Edge of the North. Will the changes to Baron and Dragon make the boss fight harder or simply more interactive? That is absolutely a question
That
for
is
you.
actually a really good question because, you know, it depends what you mean by hard, right? Baron on live is kind of defined by this one spell called Wrath of the Ancients, and this is the big acid rain that we're all kind of familiar with, right? He kind of does a lot of damage, shreds armor and armor, and whether or not he casts it, because it's actually completely random, will determine, you know, maybe the outcome of the ensuing team fight. And that's something that we really don't want because, you know, when you have tournaments, when you have like a cash tournament on the line, right? You don't want whether or not he casts a spell to really determine whether or not you potentially win the game. So the question is like whether it's harder or more interactive. Well, we definitely wanted to make it more interactive, but whether it's actually harder is going to be entirely up to the live balance team. But what we did want to do was make it more predictable. We wanted to make it more sort of consistent, right? Because if you fight Baron 10 times, you shouldn't maybe die 2 or 3 out of those times, right? You should kind of understand, know what you're going into. Right?
And maybe you can talk a little bit about the pattern that we now use on the Baron fight.
So instead of having Baron cast completely random spells like he does on live, right? Because literally it's completely random. Instead, we have a sequence for him. So he'll do 3 auto attacks or basic attacks, and then he'll do a spell, and then he'll do 3 auto attacks, and then a spell. And those spells that he casts are actually completely in sequence as well. So he'll do ABC, ABC, ABC instead of, you know, completely randomly.
Yeah, and hopefully that will clean up the fight, make it a little bit easier, and also feel more epic. I mean, when we started out, I was really like, guys, what can we do to make this visually, hopefully, more epic?
And he's way bigger, as you guys can see.
Here's a good question from Mint DX. Does the update affect last hitting?
You know, that's a really good question. I think that's going to depend on, you know, you, right? Some players have so far said that it helps a lot. Some players have said it's slightly worse. But we've generally hoped that, you know, the people who do say it's slightly worse, it's more of an adjustment thing.
Yes.
And we're definitely going to be keeping a very, very close eye on this because, you know, of course, gameplay and clarity, right? Those are our two two of our big tenets for this maps, and we want to make sure that, if anything, it's easier to hit last hit.
Right, and I think in general, it doesn't take a year to make a map. So that we could do that much faster. It does take more than a year to make the map.
The map,
and
right.
part of that was, going through these iterations over and over again, like affecting last hitting, making adjustments to the animations, a frame earlier, a frame later. And what we did do is we made it more consistent. We actually looked at the attacks, for instance, on minions in the current SR, and we found some discrepancies in the code. We got rid of those. We made sure that they hit at the same time, that when the particle is actually firing at you, it's always at the same time. So it was all there to improve clarity, make sure that people are now more predictable fighting against minions. And especially when it comes to something like blue buff and smiting, that might make the difference between winning or losing a fight.
Yep.
Next question.
Next question. All right. Mr. Gyrus Laud says, from the preview, it looks much bigger than the map now. Will the size of the map change?
Well, I mean, we mentioned it briefly. We cleaned up the space, so the size itself won't change. But in the nav mesh, the navigation mesh on which you run around is exactly the same.
Right.
Mario Hunter has a fun question. Will there be any Easter eggs on the map?
Oh, boy. So, yes, there's going to be a lot of Easter eggs. Some of them will be probably very, very difficult to find, hopefully. I don't know. You guys find stuff really quickly. But there's going to be a lot of Easter eggs. They're going to be absolutely crazy. And I think that's all we really want to say now, Ducks. What? Next question.
Yeah, next question. That is a really important question from Oliver Twix F. Summoner's Rift looks nice, but it seems dark. Are you guys working on that?
Good question.
So, yes, number one, this is exactly why we put this out. We want to get early feedback, and your feedback is really important, and we are starting to react to the feedback right now. But I wanted to explain a little bit why the impression of darkness might come. Because what we did to improve clarity and the readability is we created a visual hierarchy as the R team. The things that are most important to our players are the UI, because of course you have to be able to click your buttons. And because of that, we moved them into a very high saturation and high brightness level. Right. And then secondly, it's champions and spells, right? If you don't know that you're gonna get hit by a spell, that doesn't help you with the gameplay. So we made sure that they have also a high brightness, high saturation level. And in order to do that, we had to actually tone down the background a little bit more so that the characters and the gameplay is popping up a little bit more. And here's the thing, once you start playing the map, it's really hard to go back because it's so clean, it's so much more readable that you are like hopefully agreeing that that is a change for the better. Now, that being said, if we end up being too dark, we'll listen to that feedback. We'll brighten it up. We'll find elements where we can make it brighter. And maybe we can go into the north side of the very edge of the map, really going to the far north, and I can show you guys something. Because there are elements where we can really increase the brightness even further north. Go all the way to the vista, please, Nathan. Yeah. So Nathan is our cameraman that is right now reacting. As you guys can see, we have this beautiful vista in the north, right? And you already spotted that once in a while there was a dragon. But as you can see, these are much brighter tones because this is not gameplay space. So it allows us to have vibrant, bright colors. We just have to pick our battles very wisely because in the end, we're serving a need, which is a gameplay. And as an art team, what we want to do is make the gameplay stand out as much as possible.
And you know, like, we plan to spend a good amount of time on PBE.
Oh, yeah.
And testing and just making sure that we really iron this out and make sure that, you know, we take as much feedback as we can, implement that feedback. And, you know, obviously this is for you guys. So we want to make sure you guys are happy with it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Now here's a gameplay and art question from ED7. The camera angle looks a bit different. What's going on there? Maybe you can talk about the gameplay side.
I can start with the gameplay side, right? So actually, no, why don't you actually tell us what happened to the camera? Well, you have a good perspective on it.
Sure. Okay, so from an artistic point of view, what we did is we narrowed the field of view, which would actually reduce your view, but then we took the camera and we moved it out higher. And that gives you the exact same impression visually. You will still see the same edges that you saw before, same space. But what it will do, it will reduce the fisheye effect. And what that does for us as an art team is really helpful. Whereas currently, if you have a tree that is upright in the middle, it starts leaning toward the edge on the current SR.
Right.
We will now have trees that always look upright, and that will make it a little bit easier for us to make beautiful art, and then also for the skill shots.
Right,
and maybe you could talk about that.
And really, just to kind of reiterate on the fisheye effect, right? For those of you guys who play shooters, there's usually a FOV slider, right? Field of view slider. And the higher you put the FOV slider, the more you can see. Although once you get too high, there's a lot of distortion. You get some visual artifacting, right? And that's what we really wanted to remove, right? Because on live SR, if you're actually looking for it, right, skill shots that are coming out of the edge, like Nidalee Spear or Ash Arrow, or even skill shot indicators, like if you're trying to aim something, they actually get slightly distorted. They start becoming distorted at the edges, and that's the sort of effect that we wanted to remove with this change. But also kind of interesting is that if you imagine like this being the ground plane and the camera kind of shooting here, right, you're naturally going to see more space at the top of the screen than you are at the bottom. And one of the nice side effects of this change is that we're going to slightly equal out the amount of space you see at the top and at the bottom, and that'll be much better for players.
Okay, so next question is, the minimap seems new. Did anything change? And that comes from Tibby309.
Yes, so in fact, the minimap did change. Obviously, everything here, the minimap, the map itself, is still work in progress. But
I'm sorry.
But the minimap, yes, did change. We're applying the same principles in terms of art clarity to the minimap that we are applying to the map itself, right? So we want to increase the contrast on it so things pop out. You can tell exactly where pathable space is, etc. Right? And we're going to be making a lot of improvements, not necessarily tied to the new to update to Summer's Rift, but a lot of exciting things coming out soon, that will improve gameplay clarity.
Yes. Matt SGD says, are there any changes to the Fog of War?
So, really great question.
Yeah, good eye.
There are actually some changes, some very subtle changes to the Fog of War. Alex, can you talk a bit about that, actually?
Yeah, I mean, we looked at it as from a visual point, and we wanted to clearly distinct where Fog of War is and where it isn't. And we looked at the old map, and from a technical point of view, the resolution on the Fog of War was really low.
It's very poor.
We, I think, quadrupled that at least to have a better, finer resolution on that. But also, we wanted to, on the one hand, find a hard line that tells you this is the Fog of War, but then also give a nicer little gradient that kind of just, like if you see a screenshot of it, looks nice.
Right, exactly. So if you look on live, actually, the way the fog works is pretty interesting, because what you have is like you have clear sight of this, right? It's pretty bright. And then you have this very, very large piece, which is actually, you have sight of it, but it's slightly more grayed out. And then you have the actual dark pieces, right? We actually removed a lot of that like 3-step gradient, and we made it a single, much smoother gradient. And you can see this really readily with a champion like Quinn, who, as soon as she uses her, Valor, give me a vision thing, you see like, oh wow, there's a really strange looking gradient there. Yeah.
So it seems like we're slowly coming to the end, and of course, one of the questions we hear over and over again comes, like in this case, comes from Jordan Apples. Is there a set date for the Summoner's Rift VU to come out? So currently, there's not a set date, and there are a couple of reasons for it. Number one is we're already starting to address the feedback that we got from you guys, right? As soon as we put the map out, we got some great feedback, and we're currently addressing this, and we want to hit the right tone by the time we put it out. Yeah. Secondly, technical stuff. We want to make sure it runs on every toaster on this planet that currently runs Summoner's Rift, so that's what we aspire to, right? And so for us, we got to work on that. We've got to make sure it runs on as many PCs as possible.
And we really want to make sure we capture the spirit of Summoner's Rift. That's super important for us. It has to feel like Summoner's Rift. And we're going to work as long as we need to, until it's finished, to make sure that's accomplished.
So I hope we answered most of your questions, but I'm sure there are plenty more. Look forward to more dev blocks. You just released a dev block on some of the gameplay elements. I will talk a little bit about the creatures and the art side of it. We have awesome dev blocks lined up that we're going to release over time. We also gonna see more videos out, hopefully direct feeds. So if some of the encoding doesn't look as good, hopefully we'll get you guys the direct feed, how the game looks like on your guys' monitor.
Yeah, and be sure to comment here. Like forums, Reddit, Twitter, whatever. Feedback is super important for us.
Exactly.
Like, we cannot emphasize how important it is to us here.
Yeah, so we're really excited to play it ourselves on live, and we'll work really hard to get it out as soon as possible. We'd love to hear your feedback. My name is Alex.
Richard Liu, Riot Gnome.
Thank you guys so much.
Alex.
Riot, Captain Alex. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we'll see you guys on the Summoner's Rift.